Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Arnott from Newcom Media and your current CAEM president. Thank you for joining us today on this bright but snowy day. It's snowing where I am anyway. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate in this session. The Education Committee has worked very hard to produce interesting and informative webinars for our association, and today is going to be a great one. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to note that registration for our annual conference is now open. We are looking forward to connecting with everyone this year in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Please visit the CAEM website to register. On behalf of CAEM's Board of Directors, I'd like to thank CAEM's strategic partners for their unwavering support of the association and helping fuel important education events like our webinar today. Please join me in recognizing and thanking Exhibition Place, Destination Toronto, GES, the International Center, Cross Connect, RBC Convention Center Winnipeg, BMO Center at the Stampede Park, Ignite Magazine, and Quebec City Business Destination. Our sponsor for CAEM's 2025 webinar series is Exhibition Place. It is my pleasure to welcome Courtney Sweet to say a few words. Over to you, Courtney.
Thank you, Melissa. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those joining us from the West Coast. My name is Courtney Sweet, and I am an account executive at Exhibition Place. We are proud to sponsor today's discussion on the value of event partnerships and sponsorships. Events thrive on collaboration. Many of our valued partners speaking today and participating online exemplify this, offering innovative solutions and a shared dedication to delivering exceptional event experiences. These partnerships and sponsorships create a lasting impact, enhancing individual events and driving industry-wide progress. Together, we can push the boundaries of what's possible, ensuring each event is engaging, seamless, and successful. One of the best practices we share with our clients and partners at Exhibition Place is that of sustainability. When we host at Exhibition Place, we are working together towards a greener events industry. Our clients and partners immediately benefit from our commitment to sustainable practices, including energy efficient systems, waste diversion programs, and renewable energy options. As an early adopter of the Net Zero Carbon Event Pledge, we are committed to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Through our Green Smart program, launched in 2004, we've integrated green technologies and sustainable practices across our site, ensuring events held at Exhibition Place contribute to a greener future. Our LEED Gold Enercare Center and LEED Silver Automotive Building are both powered by 100% green renewable energy. Our commitment to sustainability means lower operating costs when it comes to hosting your event with us. We collaborate closely with event organizers to find further opportunities to integrate sustainability into each event. Our partnerships with OVG Hospitality and Cerise Fine Foods also contribute to the sustainability of food services through sustainable sourcing and innovative practices. We have introduced new ways for exhibitors and event partners at Exhibition Place to reduce their carbon footprint by purchasing carbon offsets for their activation at events. This provides an opportunity for everyone involved to actively contribute to reducing the environmental impact of events. At Exhibition Place, we believe the strongest events are built on the strongest partnerships. By working together, we can drive innovation, create meaningful experiences, and make a lasting impact on our industry and our planet. Thank you to CAEM for hosting this webinar and connecting the industry. Please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the sales team at Exhibition Place to explore how we can collaborate on your next sustainable event. Thank you.
Courtney, thank you so much for those words, and thank you to you and Exhibition Place for sponsoring our webinar series this year. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the host of today's session, Mikey Singer. Mikey is the president and founder of MKEM. He is also a valued CAEM board member and co-chair of the CAEM Education Committee. Welcome, Mikey.
Thank you, Melissa, for that great intro. Really happy to be here today and to talk about the future of sponsorships with our special guest for this fireside chat. He has 18 years of experience in selling sponsorship for both MLSE and now with his vice president role within Brands Amplified, and where they do sales for all of the Mervis productions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jory Amar.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet everybody virtually, I guess, and looking forward to today's chat.
Well, it's actually Jory's second time with us. I dragged him in 2018 to our very first Power Education Day, where he sat with us on a series of panels with great experts, and he did a wonderful job there.
Appreciate that.
Jory, it's great to have you back. So the first question I wanted to talk to you is about the evolution of sponsorships in the event industry. What common challenges do you face when securing high value sponsorships, and how can you help overcome those?
Yeah, so that's a pretty loaded question, but I think what everyone realizes, like I started, selling sponsorships in 2007, 2008. And back then, sponsorships were all about just putting a logo on a poster. So when I had started at Live Nation, and we had what's now the Budweiser stage. It was all about filling logos and creating little small 10 by 10 activations among a space. And that's really the only touch points that you had around the actual concert venue. But as sponsorship evolved and as marketers evolved, it's much more than about just being on the ground, but really tapping into consumers' passion points everywhere that they are, whether that's on social, whether that's at retail. Being a strong voice and having the connectivity between what it is that you're positioning yourself both as a sponsor really gives you a foot up with consumers. And you kind of see it with, Scotiabank as the Bank of Hockey, for example. They're not just an official partner of the Maple Leafs, they're official partner from the grassroots level all the way up. And the way in which they activate it really makes it more about hockey as a sport and as a movement versus just sponsoring individual teams.
That's a great
point.
When
we talk about, sorry, Mikey, go ahead.
No, you go. You I don't want to stop your riff. You go, sir.
So when we're talking about common challenges, I mean, anyone who's out in the market pitching clients understands this to a T. And we're all competing with each other in one way or the other. There are only so much brand dollars that go around the sponsorship ecosystem. And traditionally, those brand dollars have been put into sports, music, entertainment. And when you're challenged going up against a sports property who has the impact of broadcast and reach that far exceeds what you would see at a pure event level, it really makes it difficult to kind of generate the same types of dollars that you're seeing for, a Raptor partner versus an auto show partner. Now, not to say that all impressions aren't the same, because they're not, but it's about really carving out a niche to help tell your story through the lens of the event and the property that you're pitching and making it relevant to the brands that you're speaking with. I've never been a big believer in selling tiered-based sponsorships. I think when you look at sponsorship and marketers as a whole, the main thing you need to understand is, how do I connect with this audience in an authentic way that at the end of the day enhances the experience for both the brand and the fan? And when you go in to talk to pitch a potential partnership or deal, the first meeting's always got to be about discovery as, what does the brand stand for? What are you trying to do as a brand? What are your key KPIs? And then building backwards around that so that you can craft a great story when you're pitching a prospect, so that you're listening to what it is that they need and how you can provide it to them, while also providing interconnectivity to the event itself.
Okay, that was great. And that went far beyond, but also led to a couple other questions that I've got for you. So you talked about telling a story and learning KPIs. What are some of the key questions you would ask a potential brand partner?
Some of the key questions of, obviously, everyone always wants to get into the budget question. Like, what are we working with? I need to understand, I don't want to come in here if you're looking at a Ferrari and give you a proposal for, a value brand car versus that. So a lot of the times it's asking, and you can do a lot of the research beforehand. Like companies love to talk about themselves on their website, through their social, on LinkedIn. There's always brand stories to dissect. And the more that you know about those specific stories, a big part of sponsorship that's really taken off in the last decade is behind cause-based marketing, right? All of these brands have foundations, they have things that they contribute to. How can you be a part of that? How can you be integrated in a way that is helping fund community initiatives, but also marketing initiatives in terms of who is it that you're looking to attract? What does your key consumer base look like? And who is the new consumer base that you might be willing to go after? Obviously, having worked in sports and music, I was talking to a lot of the same consumer base for, people are like, how do I reach 18 to 34 males? Like, yeah, they're watching hockey, they're watching basketball, and there's lots of brands that kind of stayed within that lane. But I'll give you a theater example because that's the business I'm in now, is we have shows like The Lion King, for example, which really, when you look at the demographics, it's like 2 to 92. And how do you find the interconnectivity of the entire piece of the puzzle? Well, it's about segmenting your audience. And the more that you know about your audience and the more of a story that you can tell why it makes sense for this brand to partner with your show is going to make your job as a seller a whole lot easier and increase revenue across your event. So what I mean by that is how a Gen Z customer would consume your content versus how a boomer would consume your content are completely different. Boomers are much more kind of within the traditional media pipeline versus Gen Z wants to hear it from influencers on TikTok and on Instagram and on Twitter, and that's where they get their news and information from. So it's about having a voice across multiple channels, but not having it consistent in the messaging. It's actually looking at how do we change the messaging to better connect with our audiences in an authentic way. And I think that when sponsors are looking at that, I have a general theater demographic, but then I have specific shows. Like we have the Light Aid musical right now playing at the CAEM Mirvish Theater that is very much like a Gen X boomer demographic. Well, our brands are going to want to speak to those customers in a different way versus, a show like And Juliet, which is all about, 2000, 2010 pop hits, which is speaking more to that 18 to 34 audience. So what we tell our partners is when you're doing up creative for Playbill or if you're doing any sort of activation on the ground, make it contextually relevant to the fan and you will see far greater results in your activity.
I love that. That's a great answer again, which led me to a couple other questions, but I want to go to the first one before we move on to really breaking down some of those market segments and thinking about what evaluations the brands are looking for. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk about something you said in the last answer, which was you don't create platinum, gold, silver levels for sponsorship. So how are you pricing things out? Do you have an a la carte menu? What do you do for your sponsor values?
So that's a great question because you never want to sell yourself short. And what I mean by that is if you had a $100,000 presenting partner package, but this client could potentially have $500,000 to really own something. It's when you look at sponsorship, you have asset-based inventory. So those would be your booths at a show, those would be your promotional materials, those will be your social channels. And then it's what can you create beyond the asset? And that's really where you can, look to generate new revenue streams as well. So if you know that, your consumers are really content focused on things within the show, but you have a brand that's presenting a behind the scenes look, that is something that can be sponsorable. And I think that when you tier it off, yes, it makes their lives easier in terms of, okay, you know what, I'm going to come in as a silver sponsor. That's what I'm kind of comfortable with. But it doesn't give you any customization, which is really what brands are looking for these days. They don't want to, it's not just about having a sign up at a venue. It's about building lasting impressions and creating fan experiences.
Okay. Now, with that, I got another question that we sort of touched on a little bit, but what metrics are brands prioritizing when evaluating event sponsorships? And how can our organizers better align with them?
Yeah, so I think when you're looking to do kind of large scale partnerships, right? The elements which you build into the deals have to be measurable in some way. Now, there's going to be some that, like if I'm looking at a billboard outside of one of our theaters that one of our partners is on, I know the estimated traffic that's walking by there in a day, but I don't know how these customers are engaging with the billboard. So unless you had something that was a direct actionable item like a QR code or something AR based that you're interacting with, like we had a lot of AR based stuff when we did Harry Potter because again, those consumers are younger, they're very tech savvy. So to create those spaces and share those Instagrammable moments, that was something that we knew we had to do because our social ecosystem is only so big. But when you work with influencers and organic posters from, you're seeing 2,000 people there a night times 8 nights a week, your ecosystem grows and your message grows further. So, it's very interesting to look at measurables. Obviously, you can measure a digital ad because there's a click-through rate and it's an impression. Unless you set up specific intent measurabilities. So as an example, like if I were a beer brand and I wanted to sponsor a show, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We could do beer sampling, of course. This is the official beer of the show, so we're serving it. So we're going to know at the show how many beers we sold, how many impressions that generated, but how do we measure future intent and purchase? And that's really always been a tricky part about sponsorship. Yes, you could see brand lift, over a period of time, but was that specific to an event that you had been a part of? Was that specific to creative that you had in market? Was that specific to seasonality? There's so many different variables that really, I think, working with some of these large scale research companies, like I know when we were at Maple Leaf Sports, like IMI was a huge, huge research partner for us. And when you can identify showing brand lift in certain segments, how it's skewed amongst different demographics, when you go back to that partner, your story at the end of your event is, hey, here's some great things that we did. Here's exactly the type of person we spoke to. We skewed a lot higher in this segment than we had thought. And how do we build, adapt, and change into next year so that we could continue on this journey with these customers and really help build an extensive relationship with the end user.
Is there any key levers that they should be using for gauging their audience? Maybe exit surveys specific to the sponsors or heat mapping different areas using NFC? And again, the reason I'm asking is the hardest thing for events to do is to prove the value, and you just said it, of the sponsorship buy and get them back year after year because it's times get tough. It's the first things to go unless you can prove the value of your show, event, conference to that specific sponsor with tangible metrics.
Yeah, and so I think when you're looking at it from that perspective, like back in I guess the earlier days of sponsorship, coming up with valuations and numbers was just like a dartboard. It's like, see what sticks, see what kind of appetite they have. But I think now more than ever, you can measure fan engagement. And I think if you are setting yourself up for success with working with one of these research firms, now it's also a little bit difficult if you're, let's just say you have, and I'm not sure the exact numbers that kind of play in this space, but let's say, for example, you have a 25K partner that wants to come on and really measure the impact of the partnership. Mm-hmm. Well, the research could kind of cost half that budget. And it's like, is that the best way? Look, I understand that for a lot of the shows that you guys produce, sponsorship is a huge revenue driver to help offset a lot of huge upfront capital costs to build, promote, and sell the show. And I get that, but I think there's finding a happy balance. And Mikey, to your point about exit surveys, like you'd be surprised how much people would participate with you saying, hey, we're going to give out a $500 American Express gift card to participate in the survey. We'd love to know your feedback. And you can really tailor your questions to understand the partner landscape within the show. What was impactful? What did people remember? The one thing that I remember when I started over here at Mervish Productions was I had a conversation with David Mervish on, I think it was like my first week here. He looked at me and said, we're excited to have you. Don't turn this place into the Air Canada Center. Meaning he didn't want to see a plethora of brands all activating against each other. He's like, I don't want to see the rink board look in our theaters. And each show and each venue and each event has its own look and feel. And for us, we always tell our partners, we want you to be a part of the event, but we don't want you to stick out like a sore thumb. So when you're designing creative to have in the theaters, we want it to be reflective of what each of those theaters represent, which is, again, a lot of our theaters are these beautiful marvels of architecture. Well, we don't want a big kind of end cling sign popping out of nowhere, like looking at a place. So a lot of the time it's about integrating into the show in an authentic way that makes you feel like you're part of it, as opposed to just being the loudest. And I think when my business partner and I had started this agency, we had said, look, we've both worked in sports and entertainment for a long time. We took a lot of the learnings from there, but how can we do a better job with fewer clients that allow these partners to really stick out and own the space, as opposed to owning a minute within the experience? Like, you go to a hockey game and you go to a basketball game, it's like, okay, so we're going to do the AMJ Campbell move of the game. That partner owns that minute. They've got some LED signage floating around, and then that's done. But when you go and survey those fans in terms of what they remember, if you have 50 different brands activating, you might be lucky if they remembered 5, right? So I think when you talk about trade shows, customers are already going to be massively inundated with the amount of brands and companies that are on the ground level trying to vie for your attention, that you really need to do partner level stuff in a bigger way that is really eye-catching and engaging, because that's the only way that you're going to stand out from the crowd.
Speaking of which, how can events offer more experiential or interactive sponsorship opportunities? And would you suggest that they have some in their back pocket for sponsors, or let the sponsors come to them with ideas?
I think it's a mix of both. I mean, it's always great to have some ideas ready baked that you could kind of throw out there just to gauge to see how they would react to them. But when we're talking about experiential and interactive opportunities, I mean, and it could be the simplest thing, but like, I remember when we did Bat Out of Hell at the CAA at Mervish Theater, Harley Davidson was a partner on the show, and people just wanted to take their picture on the Harley with the branded backdrop, because it's all, social media is all about the humble brag. Look where I am, look what I'm doing, you're not here. And it's really, if we can find unique ways to help storytell for that brand and give them organic social push by doing something as small as that, or even like, a 360 video booth, or, any sort of interactive photo opportunity, it just gives, again, it's all about the ecosystem growing on top and over and above of your current ecosystem. It just gives you more share of voice in a very cluttered social market.
One of our members just said they took that picture on the Harley, so obviously it was very effective. I wanted to talk to you. We spoke a little bit about this, but Amex had an activation for their VIPs in your theater that was both a heavy lift for your staff and wasn't really working so well for the Amex clients. So do you want to talk about how you worked with them to come up with a better concept?
Yeah, so, American Express has been a partner over here since 1993. And they've been really invested, obviously, in growing the entertainment, and obviously Toronto being a cultural epicenter for theater. We've had Amex priority lines and priority bars in our theaters for the last 5 years. Now, when we were redoing our partnership, and we spoke to the team over there. We want to go through all of the elements with them to understand what's your perception of how it's working, how is it actually working, and what could be some fundamental changes that we could deploy to make it a better experience. So while the Amex line, when you go to Pearson on a March break Monday to jump the security line, is a fantastic idea, in the theater world, it's not as relevant. And I think really what Amex has done as a brand is made it all about experience. So what is it that we can do for our card members that put us in an above and beyond light than what our competitors are doing? And they love to own spaces that have the ability to do that. So if you go to Bud Stage, there's a beautiful American Express lounge in that you can go in, have drinks during the show, have drinks, at set break, whatever it is. So what we were doing this year is we wanted to make it a way more experience-based and really leave a lasting impressions on those card members that we know come to the theater and are big theater fans. So we're going to be setting up kind of platinum card member events where you come down to a show, we throw a private party, either pre-show or post-show. You have a customized suite that you can brand where we're providing all card members with complimentary food and drink at intermission. And then following the show, we do some sort of special experience, whether it's a cast meet and greet, whether it's a Q&A session. Again, experience is key. People during COVID realized how much they needed to be out there, and that's why you saw a huge surge in event attendance following, because we were locked into our house, and you want to feel that sense of community and that sense of gathering. And I think that on an event level, if you're going to to an event with like-minded people, like, you feel like you're part of that family, you feel like you're part of the community, and it's really a special thing. And look, everyone has lots of stresses in their lives, and it's like, I tell people, when you come into the theater, you are off your phone for 3 hours, and you're disconnecting from whatever happened during your day, good or bad, and you're immersing yourself into another world where you can really be part of a story. And I think that's what experiences deliver at an event level. It's about being part of a story, being part of a movement, and being part of a community that relies on each other to build shared experiences.
Great answer once again. You go to events, so you go not just you go to, I'm sure, trade shows, consumer events, card shows, things like that. Walking through, what are the major things that you think these event people are leaving on the table in terms of value or sellable assets?
So I would have to assume a significant percentage of revenue from a trade show is attributed to the vendors, right?
Correct.
Like, I remember being at the Sport Card Expo last year with my son, and we're walking around, and it's like, all right, where do you start? Like, it was like very overwhelming, right? And I think things that can be done in terms of, like, again, any sort of marketing collateral, physical or digital, can be sponsorable, can have a story as part of it. Directing, even like things that, like, wayfinding signage. And, I know, like, at the Sport Card Expo, for example, like, creating those VIP elements, you want to sell money can't buy experiences, right? If you're the boat show, for example, are you working with, like, one of your key vendors to have, like, an exclusive evening prior to the show opening where you're showcasing all of the new line for the 2025-26 season and wining and dining? Like, at the end of the day, we're in the relationship business, right? You need to be servicing the hell out of these partners and these clients and being at as many industry-related events, but also marketing-related events. And that was a big thing that was kind of imprinted on us back at Maple Leaf Sports, was just being part of that community, because you'll realize, like, it's a very small community that keeps coming back full circle. So, try not to burn bridges, in other words. I think a lot of the stuff that you're going to look at when you're building out these ideas and things you might be leaving on the table is create experiences that people can really own as a brand and enjoy, and find a unique way to storytell as part of those experiences. Like it could be something silly, like somebody wearing a VR headset and transporting, like working with a tourism board where, like I thought Air France used to do a really good job at this at TIFF. So opening Friday of TIFF, they have the whole King Street shut down, real pain in the ass to move around, but great for partners because there's so much foot traffic, so much hype coming in around the city. They created a pop-up bistro selling, French food and French pizza. So really, again, it's about feeling a part of something. Even if you're doing it at an event level, creating, and you want to promote a destination as an example, like VR headset, sitting back in a beach chair, having a little heater blowing on you so you really feel, shake that winter cold off you. Like there's so many different ways to create opportunities. And I think sometimes it's very easy for sponsorship sellers to get lost in the asset nature. Now, I think asset-based selling has a purpose and is still an important part because, again, those are the measurable pieces. Like I know if a client is buying into our program, I know exactly how many times that program is going to be given out throughout a run of a show. I know what that value is worth to marketers. Now, some brands will say, oh, well, our agency only evaluates it at 25% of what you're saying it's going to cost. But are those agencies also having the luxury of having, a couple $1 million upfront that they get rates that are 40% off versus what your actual value is? And I think a big piece of when you're going out to market to sell this is don't discount your product. The price is the price. You can provide extra value. But I think that it's important when you're looking to build out a strategy for sponsorship sales. A lot of what you want to do is figuring out ways to lock in multi-year partners, because not only does that give you the ability to know that you have revenue secured for future years, but really it gives you the ability to build and grow with that partner. So say, hey, in year one, this is the big idea that we're going to wrap around. We're going to take what your big brand play is at market, and we're going to make it applicable to this specific show and event. And this is how we're going to tell that story. But in year two, once we look at the results and see, okay, what really worked, what didn't work as well, we're going to be nimble and shift, because at the end of the day, we need to provide these brands and these marketers with the ability to be nimble and the ability to try different things. And once you're able, like, it's hard to do that on a one-off partner, and I think that sometimes it doesn't always work that you can secure multi-year. Like I've done enough one-year partners, but when you do have the one-year partner, you have to be really focused on understanding from the get-go, what are your KPIs? Because if you don't know how they're going to measure the success of this partnership, you are at a huge disadvantage from the get-go.
That segues me into the next question, which is how do we transform that one-time partnership into that long-term? And not necessarily signing a multi-year contract, but taking an endemic sponsor and making them part of your event for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that, again, a lot of this comes back to relationships. People buy from people they like. People buy from people who bring them ideas and bring them concepts and don't make that understand that they're thinking, that you're thinking on their behalf with their creative lens, but also not being forceful with to say, hey, like, you need to be a part of this. But if you have the post-event analytics that can showcase that, hey, this did work for you, here's why it worked for you, here is a segment of customers that you wanted to reach, which we reached in spades, you're giving them no opportunity to say no. It's like, this is why it worked for you. This is how it worked for you. And I think that when you're working with one-year partners, you really have to focus on service levels, not just leading up to the show and when the show ends, but throughout the year. And that could be, anything. It could be things like you saw them post something on LinkedIn and you send them a private message. Hey, really love what you guys are doing with the MS Society. How could we help amplify this message for you next year? Is there something, just understanding who they are as people and who they are as brand marketers, that is going to help you grow into the next phase of your relationship, which is hopefully locking up a multi-year deal.
I love that. And again, it's about relationships. There's a
Absolutely.
couple of things you said, and I'm gonna try to recap all of your actionable notes that you've given us. But you talked about how relationships are going to be so important, and how this is a small pool of individuals that you're going to be dealing with, and they may be at company A this time. They could be at company B the next year that you go back to talk to them. So again, small pool, building those relationships for long-term partnerships. Um, another thing I wanted to talk to you about that you touched on briefly is how can social media and influencer marketing really help expand that message, and how can some of these shows or events utilize that?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. And it's funny, I had a meeting last week with a great influencer marketing agency out of Toronto, and they specialize primarily in film and TV influencer strategy, and they were looking to dive into the theater base. And I think what we need to realize is that, and I'm going to speak specific to TikTok because TikTok is not a pay per follower model. TikTok is all paid based on views. So, what you need to do as a show or as an event is, again, who is it that we're trying to go after? Are they, if this is like the sport card show, okay, well, there's lots of different analytics and research that can show you how some of these influencers, the types of accounts they follow, the content they post. And I think what's really big for them is that, you see the craziest things go viral. And it's not to say that necessarily every event post would go viral, but if you're working with the right people and understanding working with the right influencer, that's going to help craft your message. And I think there are a couple different tiers in the way that you work with influencers these days, which is you have what's called like just like a sponsored post where you really are in full control of the
Love it.
message. I'm going to send them ahead of time this like, beautiful package of all of our latest gear and whatever. Great. Some marketers will, and some customers will kind of take that with a grain of salt. And then you have your organic influencers, where that's people that you are inviting down to help tell the story in the way that their followers are used to them speaking and being a part of it. So it's a way more authentic voice that you're getting to help amplify your message. But it's, at the end of the day, like anything else, it's about identifying the right people to work with that are going to speak to that audience that you think your audience is going to best connect with. And what does that all tie back to? That all ties back to understanding your audience at your shows, so that, there's a great tool out there called Sponsor Pulse. A few former brand marketers created. It shows how properties index against certain categories. So if you know that like your crowd is a craft beer drinking crowd, well, you're going to go walk into every, major craft brewer in the country and say, hey, our customers are 186 times more likely to purchase craft beer than your average GTA legal drinking age to 40. And when you can start hitting them with relevant stats on how you over index in certain categories, it just makes your sponsorship pitch so much more holistic and relevant because they know they're fishing where the fish are.
Love that. And also, just wanted to add to that, even though I asked the question, just a note to everyone who's watching: build relationships. Just like you are with your sponsors, it is key to start building relationship with these influencers. If the first time you're talking to them is a month before the show, and you're asking them to do something for you or inviting them out, you're not likely to get a good response. Start a relationship, target and like identify key members of that space and start building that relationship, even if it doesn't pay off for years. And that's one of the things that we've done for the Sport Card Expo, one of our clients, and we've worked really hard to build relationships. And now I have a 30-person list that I go through to invite into the show for authentic messaging, right? Like, I'm not sending them a script or anything like that. I'm helping them out get to the show, and then I let them go crazy in there. And that has led to over 1 million views in organic messaging coming out of those events in the past year. So it's incredible to see what that can do for us. And just a note for everyone: build those relationships, start talking to people. It's all about relationships with everything.
And I think, Mikey, to your point about the sport card show, because it really kind of hit home, is if you want these influencers to experience the best of your show, don't just leave them a ticket at the will call. Make it an experience for them. Hey, you have somebody walking around the show kind of, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. We have this really cool area here. We've got this amazing beer garden. We have a table saved for you. Come check it out. We're going to give you some wine samples. Like, there are so many little things you can do, and that your sponsors have access to these little things to just help elevate their experience. Because if you don't want them to feel like they're, walking, like that they're part of the general population, you really want them to feel special, and you want them to experience the best that your event has to offer, so that when they're broadcasting that message to their hundreds of thousands of followers, they're talking about your event in the right light.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and something that not enough of us do. A special shout out to April Joyce, who's writing comments and questions. So April, you get the MVP for audience member. She made a note that Philips did a really great activation with VR headsets, showing what cities might look like in 15 years. That was a massive hit.
Very cool.
And again, like, just being creative, innovative. I'm not sure what show that was at. And then April asked, what do you think about loyalty discounts?
For partners?
Yeah.
I mean, look, like, sometimes if it's a partner that you work well with and a partner which you've had a good relationship with, I'm not opposed to discounting a total sponsorship package if they're able to commit longevity to you and help you grow as a show.
Yeah.
If they're coming in off the top to say, hey, okay, I want to look at a 25K package, great, but I only have 10K. Like, okay, so this is what I can deliver for you for 10K. But the second you start debiting brand equity of your show's assets and environment, you're never going to get that person back to 25K. Well, we paid 10K last year. So
exactly.
I think it's about understanding who that audience is, but also understanding that your long game is to secure these partners in a way that makes your lives easier as show producers, to know that before your show even starts planning out for 2026, you've got X amount locked up in sponsorship revenue. And, a lot of the time there's other ways that you can do from a discounting perspective. So typically, in partnership deals, there are escalators that could be anywhere from 3 to 5% year over year. You could play with those numbers a little bit. You could do even, incentive based. So, if we see X level of engagement or X number of new customers or subscribers, then we unlock additional dollars. You could, like, there's different ways to do that. And it's interesting because, when I talk to, a company, and I'll give you kind of a real life example. If we were looking for a new chocolate partner at the venues, at the theaters, right? And you're talking to, their VP of marketing, and you're talking to their VP of sales and operations. Operations and marketing have two completely different objectives for this, right? Operations, all they care about, how many pieces are you buying from me and how many pieces are you selling? Marketing is, how do I get this product to lips? How can I get these customers engaging with our brand? How do we affect future purchase intent? And how do we become a part of the life cycle marketing of the show? So I think a lot of the time, and I've had many of these calls, the salespeople just care about moving their products, versus the marketing people who also care about moving the products, but care about consumer engagement, which at the end of the day is what we're selling here as sponsorship salespeople.
Yep.
It's all about selling your audience and positioning it in a way that, like, here we have a very premium audience, like, love Costco, but we're not selling Kirkland water here. Like, Fiji's our water partner. And the reason why they are a partner is because they're connecting with a premium audience and providing the right message at the right time and place to the right people, right? And I think that when you are looking at your show, you have to kind of take a step back from, kind of being in the weeds of being everything. And it's like, who is that we're trying to attract? And then how does that reflect on our partnership strategy when we go and approach brands? Because we want to show these brands, these are who our customers are. This is why you want to be here. This is why you actually need to be here.
That's great. Okay, so we're at just over the 45-minute mark, which is where I wanted to save some time for Q&A. I also wanted to go through some of the key takeaways that we've really gone through over the course of this session, this fireside chat. So first and foremost, relationships are key. Build them out, foster them, grow them. And that includes with the brand managers as well as influencers. Second is be creative. Stop, and we talk about this all the time at the conference, but stop selling packages that are platinum, gold, silver. Be creative. Start talking to your sponsors, getting information from them, hearing their stories. I liked when you talked about going into the brand itself and how you said they love talking about themselves. Look at what they're doing, what's important to them, what you had talked about, what was really important to them in terms of a program that they're helping or a charity that they're supporting. So tying that in. Another key point that you talked about was creating experiences. And again, that's what as event people, that's what we're really all about doing. Creating great experiences, making it authentic, including your brand authentically into the event itself. So that, as you said, it's not standing out and trying to be the loudest person, but it's the best integration into the event. You talked about that, that experiences and integrations when you talked about the Amex change that you had done. So any other key points that I'm sure there's like 5 more that you've talked about that you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, just, when you're looking at building out partnerships, it's create value for the fan.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of, we have a great longstanding relationship with CAA here. They've got, their names on a couple of theaters, but really when the CAA customer comes down to our show, it's what are some things that you could do that really make them feel like the brand is listening to them. So if you're a CAA member and you come down to any Mirvish theater, you get a complimentary coffee and coat check at every show. You also have the ability to, win these experiences where we do, post-show receptions with cast meet and greets, historic venue tours, and, even at the CAA at Mirvish Theater is if you show your CAA card, we give you a 15% discount off concessions. Now, why that's important and understanding that when we talk about measurables is I can then tell CAA at the end of the year when we do our post-year wrap report, okay, here's how many coat checks we moved, here's how many coffees we moved, here's how many surprise and delight experiences we did, here's how many tickets we sold through your microsite to give, because it's all about, for CAA as an example, it's all about showcasing membership value. Everyone knows them as a tow truck, but do they also know that they have insurance and travel and advocacy? And there are many different ways to integrate, because you could go after one specific arm of their business. But when you look at it as a whole, it's how can we tap into all these individual parts that create a holistic experience. So I think that when you create things that have measurable, tangible results, you're able to say, not just be like, okay, no, it's going to work for you. I promise. I think this is the right audience. No, this is why it worked for you, or this is why it didn't work for you. And sometimes, I've had the conversation. It's not a great conversation to have, but sometimes you need to say, look, this didn't work. So let's go back to the drawing board as a team and figure out why it didn't work, what could be done better, and reinstitute what those KPIs are, so that we can look to rebuild together and work together to get to our common goal, which is creating an elevated experience at event level.
That's great. And that brings me to another key takeaway. Make sure you're capturing the KPIs that they're looking for. All right. You're going to have to provide a reason that they spent 10, 20, 50, $100,000 with your organization. It's important that you know what they're looking to get out of it so that you can provide those data points. And secondly, make sure that you have good data points on your event. If you don't have that information, you can't start selling those segments. As Jory said, he can take his audience and segment it out for individual sponsors. And I think that's a key point, especially for things like home shows or large shows, or even stuff like, Ontario Dental Association, where they can start looking at different parts of like the dentist life cycle, where they could sell to a different person on what is important. But again, like it's very important to know your audience so you can sell to those sponsors who might be interested in those segments. All right. And then I see Bianca, who is a former president, actually the previous president before Jennifer took over, and is saying that she loves the idea of a discovery meeting. And I think it's truly important. Like, I don't think you should be, I know a lot of sponsors ask for decks and things like in advance and information, and that's great. And you should send that out, but you shouldn't be selling them without an initial meeting, finding out what their interests are, what their goals are, because you could be selling something that doesn't fit anywhere what they were looking for from the event.
Yeah, I think discovery, to your point, Mikey, discovery meetings are super. It's like a first date, right? You just want to find out what you're working with, things that get you excited, things that you're not so crazy about, their appetite and willingness to, allow you to be creative, knowing how your event and how your event attendees want certain things to be within a show. And I think that the more you can do to, go in there with questions and better understand who they are as a brand and what their key marketing strategies are for that year and going forward, gives you a huge leg up. Because when you're customizing a proposal, nobody wants to read an 80-page sponsorship deck.
No.
Keep it tight, 12 pages, but really about hitting on the key areas of what you do discover throughout your conversation on what would make it a successful partnership and why it makes sense.
And Jory, if people want to contact you, have any questions, do you want to just post your email in the comment section?
Absolutely. Always happy to chat with anybody that's interested in the space, and I am here for you guys. So I'm going to put in my email. Let me just make sure I'm typing that correctly. There we go.
There we go. It made it
Please
in there.
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Be happy to chat with whoever.
And Jory, as we come to an end, thank you so much for joining us from your beautiful downtown offices, and giving us such great information. And again, touching on this after we had already been through the pandemic is definitely helpful.
Thank you, and appreciate you having me. And a little different this time. Can't see faces in the crowd, but thank you, and wishing everybody the best of luck on their shows. Keep those audiences rolling in. There's nothing better than live. We'll talk to everybody soon.
Awesome. And I'll see you on in a second after I just wrap this up. So thank you, all of you, for joining us on the last webinar of the season before we go into the actual conference, which is a reminder to please register for the upcoming conference in Fredericton if you have not already done so. I look forward to seeing you all there. I'm just going to check this beautiful thing that Jennifer has written to me. So I reminded everyone for the register for the conference. I thanked everyone. Thank Jory. And I think that brings us to an end. Courtney, thank you for that great presentation to start us off. Jennifer, thank you for being online, even though you are sick today. And Melissa, thanks once again for doing our intro as the president. For everyone else, have a great day, and we will see you soon.